What is going on, Reality Pop Nation? Thank you for being here on the Reality Pop Network. Super excited for today's episode. My name is Pooji. I am with the Pooji Podcast, as you can see here. And if you're into sports and you like sports content, go check out the Pooji Podcast. But if you're into reality TV, this is the place to be. You are at the right channel. And if you have friends that like reality TV, send them our way. Subscribe to the channel, comment, like the video as well, and be sure to comment during the live broadcast as well so we can answer your questions as we record. But today's episode, we will be going back and looking at Big Brother 23, kind of a retrospective view of the season and our thoughts on the season, as well as looking ahead to future seasons of Big Brother. But this is the block presented by Reality Pop Network, and you can check us out every Thursday following the live eviction to hear our thoughts on the week that was of Big Brother. But like I said, this week we will be talking about Big Brother 23 and future season. And I do want to welcome on my good friend Kay. Kay, appreciate you being here on the block presented by Reality Pop.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pooji. I'm so excited to be here today. I love Big Brother so much. I have been loving this show for over 10 years now. And so I am super ready to talk about Big Brother season 23, a mid-tier season that I think has a lot of heart and soul.
I'm excited you said that mid-tier season, because here on Reality Pop, we do the tier rankings for a lot of the shows that we do. And Joe chimed in asking if we could do Amazing Race recaps as well. I personally, Joe, will not be doing the Amazing Race recaps as of now, simply because I do not watch the Amazing Race as religiously. But we do have plenty of talent here on Reality Pop that can do those sorts of things, and I'll talk with those on the channel. Let's see about kind of getting those together for the Amazing Race. The more reality TV, the better. But Kay, you mentioned the tiers. We do tier ranking videos here on the channel, and I'm excited you said mid-tier ranking here. Can you explain that a little further for me, why you feel it was a mid-tier season, Big Brother 23?
Yes. I mainly feel that it was mid-tier just because at the beginning, it was promised that the season would be a new era. And I guess I was expecting, new challenges, new games that we haven't seen before, and maybe even a new style of gameplay. But I did feel like we got a lot of the similar things that we've seen in past seasons. We got the group of the big alliance, staying together and taking it all the way to the end, which, although it is a great strategy and it is admirable, you've seen it so many times. That's been the game, the past 5 or 6 years. So I was hoping for something a little bit new, but I think this season was very solid because, we got a blind side, but we also got a lot of friendship. A lot of cast members were friends. And I think overall, the casting was excellent. The gameplay was mid-tier, and overall, it was a solid, good season.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree with that completely, because we've talked about it here on the channel before, that the casting for this season just seemed above and beyond what they'd done in the past. And they did a fantastic job of just getting some great personalities, people that weren't shy to be themselves on the show. We saw Whitney be very open about some of the illnesses that she has and lives with every day, and she brought that to the show, was very energetic. We saw Derek F go in there, and he was himself as well. And Derek X even was kind of a smooth player, a great player, had a very great personality as far as being a social player. Just a lot of really fun people to watch. So for me, the season started off a little bit slow as far as not many game moves being made, but I feel like the character development, the cast development kind of made up for some of the slow play, just because we did see a lot of those good relationships form.
Absolutely. And as much as I feel like the gameplay was slow, maybe to the audience that watches it live on TV, I think it was completely opposite for the live feed viewers, if there are any out there. Just from day one, it was so thrilling watching these live feeds take place, and especially watching Frenchie, the first HOH and his craziness, and, his kind of imbalance as being HOH. It was so entertaining the first 2 weeks. I really loved it as a feeds watcher.
And I'm glad you mentioned the live feeds, though, because I'm not one that typically watches the live feeds, just because I simply don't have as much time to sit down and dedicate to it. And I never know when something crazy is going to happen. Sometimes I'll have it on in the background, and if I hear an interesting conversation kind of start up, then I'll tune in a little bit closer to the live feeds. And sometimes in the live feeds, you can get more content. But as far as the live feeds go, how does that change the perspective of the season versus watching it just strictly live on TV after the producers have a chance to cut it?
I think it really, really helps just to getting to know people and seeing them as people and human beings and not just house guests or characters in the TV show. I feel like there were some characters that we didn't get to see a lot of on the show, like Travis, obviously being the first boot. But maybe if somebody was a live feature, maybe you saw Travis and you saw what he said, and hear his stories about his family and stuff, and you feel connected to him. But unfortunately, that doesn't always translate on the live show, which I understand because they have a story to tell and they have a narrative to tell, and obviously they're not going to be able to get to everything.
Yeah, I think that's a really funny thing you mentioned there, because as I've watched more seasons and gotten older and really dived into behind the scenes of some of these shows, you realize that what they put on TV is kind of like a highlight tape for the winner. And they try and highlight some of the important moments for who they know is going to advance far. And obviously that happens more so in Survivor because it's all pre-recorded. But on Big Brother, they don't really have that chance to know who's going home when, because it's all live evictions and live shows. So I think they did a really good job just even on the live episodes on TV of showing us some of the important content that we needed as viewers for those that do just watch the 3 days during the week. And I want to go back real quick because I did mention slow gameplay, and I guess to just kind of define that for me, slow gameplay as far as it didn't really seem like anyone was trying to aggressively attack other members of the house per se. It seemed like everyone was kind of establishing who they were as contestants, but not necessarily their standing in the house. But you mentioned Frenchie. Frenchie went above and beyond to try and cement himself as some authoritative figure in the house. And that kind of turned around and bit him in the butt a little bit, because then he looked like this paranoid rat running around, not sure how to handle himself. But that's what's interesting about this show is you put these people in this house for 90 days, whatever it is, and they have to learn how to cooperate with each other and collaborate with each other. In your opinion, with the way that Frenchie kind of bailed out and just got paranoid and everything, is that just the type of gameplay that will get you axed early on in the season no matter what, just because no one else has anything to go off of?
Absolutely. I feel like I get paranoid just watching these people play the first couple days, because it's like you can say anything. You can make a comment. I think there was one season where somebody made a comment about somebody's cooking. I believe it was Kimmy made a comment about Jack's cooking, and then all of a sudden, they wanted her out. She was enemy number one. It takes anything. And so for a guy like Frenchie, who, has a big personality, right? I could easily see why this guy got cast to be on the show.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, oh my goodness, it's like I don't know if he was trying to pander to the audience or pander to the live feeders. I don't know if he was truly being his authentic self, if he really is that chaotic in real life, or what was going on. It was great to watch, but at the same time, I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, this guy knows he's not going to win acting like this, right?
Yeah, and part of me feels like, knowing his backstory and knowing he grew up on the farm, kind of was in an isolated area. It's almost like you wonder if someone like that goes into the house where they're the person interaction every day, if it almost makes them feel uncomfortable because they haven't had that experience outside the house. Whereas you look like someone like Xavier, who ended up winning the show, a lawyer who is, having these interactions day in and day out just based on his profession. He's a little bit more comfortable in those types of situations.
Wow. Yeah, exactly. I hadn't thought of it like that, but that is extremely true.
Well, it makes you wonder if that goes into the casting where they're like thinking, okay, let's get people from different walks of life that have different professions and kind of see how they come together and, form in this melting pot that is the Big Brother house that we all know it and love it as. And in seeing some of those personalities come out, and some people are able to use it to their advantage. Some people it's, obviously to their detriment. I mean, we saw a few seasons ago where they did the camp counselor, twist or whatever it was, where immediately right at the beginning of the show, people had targets on their back simply because they volunteered to be camp counselor, and people were like, okay, that person is already too aggressive. But I think what's funny is early on in the show, since you don't have much to go off of, like you mentioned with the cooking scenario, since you don't have much to go off of, you almost like you want to develop relationships with people, but you also don't want to say anything that can get held against you, no matter how minor it might be.
Exactly. Exactly. Everybody is definitely walking on eggshells, especially the first 2 weeks when everybody is first getting to know each other. The first impressions are very important. And I feel like before people even meet, they're sizing each other up and trying to, figure out who's the big threat, because even though you might necessarily not have a target because you don't know anybody, you got to get a target because you might be HOH in the next hour. Who knows? Everybody, I feel like people think they know how they're going to play the game, and they kind of know what they're going to make and the first moves they're going to do. But when you get in there, I'm sure it's a whole different story.
Yeah, and a lot of like boxers and MMA fighters always say that about getting in the rink is everyone has a plan until they get hit in the face, and then it's like, okay, now I got to fight. Now I got to get this going, and everything changes because you have a plan, and then all of a sudden you have to change and adapt based on what's going on around you and your surroundings and everything, which makes the game so beautiful and fun because not one strategy works. I mean, we've seen physical players win games. We've seen the social players win games. Derek F didn't win a competition, and he got runner up in this season. So we've seen numbers of different strategies make it to the end. And obviously the Cookout Alliance, an amazing alliance, top 2, in my opinion, of alliances. And I don't think it's number 2. But it is a top alliance in Big Brother history. I do want to mention this because you mentioned Travis. We've talked about Frenchie, but out of the first 5 players evicted, Travis, Frenchie, Brent, Whitney, and Christian, and I have a feeling I might know your answer here, but who do you think maybe would have had the best long game had they stuck around a little bit longer in the house and didn't get evicted so quickly?
My initial guess would be Christian, just because he showed himself to be such a huge comp beast during the first 5 weeks when he was at the house. I mean, he won 2 vetoes in a row, and that, really solidified the target on his back. But yeah, next to that, he also had amazing social gameplay. He was really close with Alyssa, and at one point he was really close with Tiffany, and people were trying to, conspire against, one another to keep Christian in the game. And yeah, I think he did an excellent job. But again, showing himself to be such a strong player and so good at the beginning ended up not doing him that many favors.
Yeah, no, that definitely can play against you if you are too strong early on in the game, especially what ended up happening with the Cookout. He was obviously on the outs there, so it was a definite target on his back to get him out of the game to not spoil the Cookout's plan of making it to the final 6. You mentioned you watched the live feeds. I know Brent was a pretty strong personality that the show didn't really paint the picture just how maybe annoying he was in the house. From you watching the live feeds and things like that, as far as Brent goes, was it justified him getting voted out as quickly as he did? Was he really that big of an annoyance to a lot of the people in the house?
I think so. He definitely got under people's skin, more particularly the women in the house. I know Whitney and Hannah in particular were very uncomfortable just being around Brent, and they made that known to other players, once that started happening. So then eventually everybody was kind of, annoyed with Brent. And I think even Derek X, he was getting on Derek X's nerves and kind of being condescending and a little bit, cocky at the beginning. And there's always a player like that at Big Brother. So I'm not surprised, but I'm also not surprised that his team members, the Aces, threw the competition in order just to get him out the week that he was evicted.
Yeah. No, that's definitely not a surprise to anyone, I don't think. And honestly, I don't think Whitney would have really made any noise in the game, but I do kind of feel bad for her a little bit that it felt like she got voted out next just because she was linked to Brent. And they were like, well, if you're going to cut off the head of the snake, you might as well cut off the tail of the snake as well. And that kind of seemed like the approach that they took with Whitney, because as annoyed as she was with Brent, I think she was kind of trying to separate herself from those guys that were getting, voted out early, like Frenchie as well as Brent. I think Whitney was trying her best to get out of that circle, that cone of people that were getting voted out. It just didn't work with her. And Christian went right after Whitney. And I think you're spot on about Christian is he was winning competitions, target on his back. He gets voted out. And then, the story is Christian just obviously didn't last long in the game. But this game, you mentioned the Aces started with, what was it? The Queens, the Kings, the Aces, and the Jokers. Do you like that style of play from the beginning as far as the teams go, or would you rather it just be everyone fair game from the beginning?
I don't necessarily like the team's twist because I don't like the idea of forced alliances. I don't like the idea of the game forcing people to work together that wouldn't normally work together. And I
Hmm.
think that, especially in this season, the team didn't really end up accomplishing anything. I think that if we would have went into the season with no team twist, it probably would have had the same outcome. I think a cookout probably would have still formed and they still could have easily dominated.
Yeah, because the Cookout Alliance formed even with all those members being on separate teams anyway, and they still found a way to work together when it was all said and done. So it's not like the team, honestly, in my opinion, it almost felt like the team twist prolonged some people's lives in the house that maybe weren't worthy of advancing in the game just because their team had immunity or their team had the HOH power. So it really felt to me like some players got advanced further in the game just because they were on the right team, not necessarily because they were playing the right game. And I think the team aspect of Big Brother kind of dilutes the way we view players. We think, oh, just because they made it further because their team did, they might be viewed as a better player of the game. But the team twist did kind of dive rather quickly this season. They kind of kept referencing it just to kind of make it relevant again, but it really didn't resonate with a lot of viewers, I don't think. And in Survivor, they have tribes, sometimes 3 tribes, 2 tribes, whatever it is. It makes more sense for that kind of show based on that format because one person can win immunity and everyone else is in danger. Where in this, only 2 people are ever on the block. Well, sometimes 3, but really only 2 people are ever on the block. So the team twist doesn't really do it for me in this. And that's honestly a twist I don't want them to bring back because I want people to have to fend for themselves from the very beginning and make those alliances, which brings me to my next point. Outside of the cookout, what players do you think had the best social game as far as developing alliances? Maybe it was a member of the cookout, but just as far as the social game in Big Brother 23, who do you think really knocked it out of the park?
I think Derek X did an amazing job this season, especially considering the fact that he wasn't really a fan of the show and he was just kind of recruited and he watched a couple seasons in Sequester and then was just thrown in. He
I love
was
that answer. I think Derek X, great answer. He was exactly who I was thinking of.
absolutely, absolutely. Not only was he America's sweetheart, as I called him, because no, it seemed like nobody had anything bad to say about Derek X in the fandom and in the house too. Nobody said a bad word of the guy. He was so likable. And I think that as much as it hurts, I think it really was a good move to get him out kind of early because who wouldn't vote for Derek X in the final 2? He's really smart. He's a strong player. He won comps and he's likable. He's a
Yeah.
shoo-in to win.
Yeah. And sometimes, unfortunately, those types of players don't even get the opportunity to win, even though looking back, we say he played a winnable game. He played a game well enough to win. And unfortunately, there's only one winner. I'm glad Xavier won because he played a winnable game. He was a guy that I think deserved to win from the moves that he made. He did a great job playing the game from start to finish, stayed under the radar, but he did enough for his resume. And again, from the likability standpoint, which kind of opposite of that, Kyland was the other, I guess, strong player of those final 4 when it came down to comps and social game. And Kylan just almost did a little bit too much further than Xavier to try and almost pad his resume. Where do you think Kylan went wrong as far as not being able to win this game?
I think Kylan's game really started to take a downward turn when he won his second HOH.
Okay.
Because that was the week. His first one, I remember it was really easy because that was the week that Frenchie left, and the house pretty much unanimously wanted Frenchie gone. But when it came to Kylan's second HOH, that was the week that Brittany left, and that really, really rubbed people, particularly Ozza and Big D, the wrong way. And people started looking to Kylan as the selfish one of the cookout.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when people started to say, like, hey, when we get down to the final 6, Kai is probably going to be the first one to go.
And Kylan maybe would have been the first one to go, but Tiffany in that final head of household before the final 6, I think it was the head of household where Alyssa ended up getting voted out and she was the last non-cookout member. to get voted out. What was the scenario again? They were playing the competition where they were on the rope and they were going around, and the cookout had decided Kyland was going to win the HOH, but then Tiffany hung on until the last second to win it in place to try and save Claire or something like that.
I believe, I'm not 100%, but I believe the plan was for Azza to win the HOH because she hadn't won anything yet. And that week they kind of wanted Claire to go home first. Everybody was kind of thinking Claire would go home before Alyssa. So it was, Azza or maybe Kyland would win, but Azza fell off early. And then it was just Tiffany and Kyland left in the competition. And I believe that Tiffany did not want to throw it to Kyland because he had already won 2 HOHs, and that would have given him a third. And then he really, would have had a huge resume after that. So Tiffany kept the win for herself, which was considered selfish. And, maybe a member of the cookout could argue that it was selfish, but I'm team Tiffany. So I'm always going to root for, whatever is in Tiffany's best interest.
Yeah, no, and I liked the move by Tiffany just because if you look at the long game, if Kyland does win that HOH and Tiffany's sitting there with Kyland at the end, that's an HOH that Tiffany can look back on and say, well, I threw it, and no one's really going to chalk it up as that. Like, people are just going to view it as an HOH win. But she would kind of have that internal regret of throwing the competition, knowing she assisted him in winning the HOH. I have no problem with what Tiffany did because at the end of the day, you need to build your resume too. And I just honestly, personally, I didn't think Backlash was going to be there from the cookout towards Tiffany in winning that HOH, but it seemed like the cookout really held that moment against Tiffany, and then she ended up being the first person voted out of the cookout.
Yeah, they definitely did, especially Xavier. I think Xavier was more pissed off than anybody. He was vocally telling people like Kyland and Derek Frazier how pissed off he was at Tiffany and how selfish she was and blah, blah, blah. I personally think that Xavier did not want Alyssa to be the one to go first just because he had he kind of liked Alyssa. I think he had a little bit of a crush on her. But yeah, him vocally painting that huge target on Tiffany's back did not do her any favors. And that was the week that it was actually ended up being the worst case scenario for Tiffany because she puts up Alyssa and Xavier on the block next to each other. Alyssa wins, takes herself off. So now Tiffany kind of has to put up Claire. And that's when we get that really, really emotional scene between Tiffany and Claire.
Yeah, that was definitely painful, and Tiffany was very vocal about making sure Claire was the last non-cookout member to stay in the game. She wanted Claire, and I think that also kind of spooked some people. Some people in the cookout maybe felt like Tiffany was playing too closely with Claire, that she would choose Claire over some members of the cookout, and then by the time she ended up putting up Claire, I think she had already lost some of the trust of the cookout to where when it did get to the final 6, Tiffany was the first person voted out. But I will say this, Tiffany, if it wasn't Xavier to win it, I think Tiffany, out of the other 5 members of the cookout, played the best game to win it. And it was just unfortunate timing. And like you said, unfortunate circumstances for her getting voted out 6th. Other than that, I mean, I think Tiffany putting together the master plan, kind of being the house mom, and she always had her ears open, was listening to everyone, playing chess, making sure all the pieces were in the right place. Tiffany, talk about people that played to win. She had a very winnable game from start to finish.
Absolutely. Tiffany came out the gate ready to play. She said she was one of the people who have been a super fan of the show for years and years and years. During her little interview before the show, she said that she wanted to win all the competitions, which of course wasn't going to happen, but she still tried her damnedest.
Yeah.
I love Tiffany. I think that she is such a gem. I really, really hope that more players like her get cast in the future. I love the way she thinks. I loved her strategy. And I love, she was messy sometimes. She wasn't afraid to be dramatic. And, she wasn't afraid to disagree with the people in her alliance and push for what she wants. And I really admire that about her.
And I think what's funny is I feel like for the most part, players can try and hold in their true self to kind of pander to the house. And, Tiffany really might have a more fiery attitude and might have more of a vocal personality, which really started to come out for her in mid-game towards the end of the game. But I do think the house ultimately always wins and gets to you and gets the best of you. And I mean, we saw it with Derek F and Azza towards the end of the season. They started turning on each other because they were fighting over who played the better game and who deserved to sit in the final two with Xavier. So the house gets the best of all of them, especially when it comes down to crunch time, when it's time to really sit there in the final two and see who's going to win that $100,000. But in your opinion, Derek F or Azza, who would you have said played the better game during the duration of the season?
So this is probably going to be a hot take, but I don't think Derek F played a completely terrible game, as you know, contrary to what a lot of fans might say. I just think that especially the last 2 weeks, he did a very, very poor job of explaining and understanding the type of game that he played. I think Azza, she was more realistic. You know, she knew that she only won one competition and she wasn't the power player of the season, but she knew that, you know, she was realistic with herself.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say which person deserved to be in the final two or which played the better game. But ultimately, Derek F was sitting in that seat, so I will give it to Derek F on this one. I just don't know if he understands why he's sitting in that seat.
Yeah, it seemed like he was trying to like fake a resume almost and like try and build up of his accomplishments more than they were, just to try and justify why he made it there. Almost like he didn't want to feel like he just rode coattails to get there, because that happens in some seasons. Obviously, we have floaters that always make it to the final six, the final four, whatever it is. So it really seemed like he was trying to play up his game more so than Azza was, when Azza, like you said, was more realistic. She owned her game. She kind of knew the game she played. I felt like from a social standpoint, Azza could have played much better, just as far as being maybe a little bit friendlier. She did rub people the wrong way in some instances. And Derek F obviously had everyone laughing, and he had kind of like that. Did he end up winning favorite house guest? Did that happen?
No,
Or was it Derek X?
it was Derek X and Tiffany that were top two.
Top two. I know Derek F, he was lovable. You know, everyone liked him. Fans and house guests both liked him. I think that's kind of helped him get to the final two as well. But we were talking about the cookout. I have to ask, as far as the cookout goes, will we ever see another massive alliance like that again, ever make it to the final six, final four? Or is that the kind of thing that happens once and then future seasons are kind of out looking for a massive alliance like that to happen?
I really hope not. I really hope that this upcoming summer season that there is some sort of change or some sort of like update to the way the game is played that prevents the big alliance from just bulldozing to the end. Because while I understand that that is, you know, the modern strategy to make it there in Big Brother, as a viewer, it does get boring to watch because you already know, okay, whoever's the biggest alliance week 3 or 4, you can probably see two of those people going to be in the final two at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it felt like the last 3 weeks up until the cookout was solidified in the final six, it felt like that was kind of exciting because you could sense that Claire and you could sense that Derek X were really trying to fight for their lives in the game. And then when the explanation came out of what the cookout was, there was a lot more understanding of what was happening, and everyone seemed cool with it. The jury house seemed cool with it and everything. But for me, the gameplay really started once it got down to the final six, because now the mission accomplished kind of thing. Now those six are fighting for the money and fighting for the title of the Big Brother winner. So when I say slow play, maybe you said it more accurately, as far as it was just very predictable up until the final six. And then once it got to the final six, it became a little bit more enjoyable to watch, just from a unpredictability standpoint. I do hope, like you said, I like the alliances of 2 or maybe 3 people that have each other's back, but maybe aren't completely loyal to each other. I do like the idea of having someone you can trust in the house, or at least you think you can trust. But I do think the game is just more fun when it's kind of like the Wild West and people are just kind of, firing from the hip week in and week out.
Yes, exactly. I couldn't agree anymore.
And do you like all the twists that get thrown into the game, or are you more of a traditional fan that maybe likes some of the more normal gameplay from early seasons? Do you like the whole roulette wheel, the coin of destiny, those things, or would you just rather stick to head of household competition, nominees, power, veto, eviction?
I think it would be nice to see more of a back to the basics, bare bones style of gameplay, just because this past season we saw a lot of those high roller room twists that they have didn't end up working. You know, the coin of destiny, Claire did win that, but she didn't end up using it at all. The roulette wheel ended up being completely irrelevant to the actual game. You know what I mean? And of course, there's no way for the producers to predict that these things won't end up happening or they will or whatnot. But it would be, I think, refreshing to see a style of gameplay that's not based on teams, that's just more every individual for themselves.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And I think obviously Survivor aired after Big Brother 23, and Survivor was throwing twists into the game every single Wednesday. Every episode had a new twist. And it's almost like the producers say, okay, let's just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks for one season, and then knowing what works and what didn't moving forward. So maybe we will have a little bit of a more mild twist game going into Big Brother 24 based off of what worked and what didn't work from this season. There was the moment where Derek X could have played the roulette wheel and potentially saved himself the week where he ended up going home. He was the only one with enough money to actually play the game, and he ended up not playing the game. And he said, I'll save it for next week, whatever it was, the coin of destiny. And he ended up not using it. And then he gets voted out with like 250 Big Brother bucks in his pocket or something like that. So
Yep.
a little disappointing there.
Thanks to, I believe, Hannah's very good convincing of Derek X not to use any of his powers.
Yeah, it is definitely fun to watch some of the twists, but also I don't necessarily know if we get the most authentic version of the game. But we will jump into this briefly because I do want to talk about this before we call it a night. Big Brother, Celebrity Big Brother is back after 2 years off. They didn't do it in 2020. They didn't do it in 2021. Obviously, it's a shortened season. There's only 11 house guests. I think this year's only 4 weeks long, kind of going up against the Olympics. But as far as Big Brother, Celebrity Big Brother, I keep wanting to say Big Brother Celebrity. It's Celebrity Big Brother. Like, I got to get that through my head. As far as Celebrity Big Brother, have you watched those seasons in the past from season 1 and season 2?
Yes, I did. I just last month actually binge watched both seasons in preparation.
There you
I
go.
It was a pleasant surprise. I really, really enjoyed the celebrity seasons. You know, I'm kind of a Big Brother purist. You know, I only watch Big Brother US. I don't watch Over the Top or anything, but I love the celebrity versions just because I like it more for, you know, the drama and the mess and the fights more so than strategy sometimes. And so it's always full of that. And I think with this cast, we are going to get some serious mess. I mean, we have Cynthia Bailey, Carson Kressley, Todrick Hall, all living in the same house together.
Yeah, it's a loaded list, and Lamar Odom's in there as well, which that'll be an interesting one to watch. You mentioned Cynthia Bailey, Todd Bridges, who people may know from Different Strokes, the TV show, a little bit before my time, but some people may know him from that. You mentioned Todrick Hall, Chris Kattan. Do you know who that is? Chris Kattan?
Yeah, he
Comedian?
is. Yeah, a comedian known for being on SNL in the 90s, which was kind of before my time.
Okay,
Also.
Chris Kirkpatrick, who a lot of us would know from NSYNC, which kind of like the ultimate boy band guy right there with Chris Kirkpatrick. If you even look at his picture, he's got the chains, he's got the little goatee going and the hair flipped up in the front. So Chris Kirkpatrick, you mentioned Carson Kressley, Teddy Mellencamp from Real Housewives. So some of these people are just used to being in a house too, just with the housewives. So it's gonna be a fun season. What I think is interesting about Celebrity Big Brother is a lot of these people in it aren't necessarily there for the money. Of course, they probably have a lot of money just from what they've done in their careers. So it does always interest me to see who's actually going to go in there and fight and play and actually play a Big Brother game versus who's just going to be on there to be, you know, fan friendly, America's favorite. Because I think that's the big difference is normal Big Brother, a typical season, you're going to get people that are in there that need the money for specific reasons in their life, where here you kind of have people that go in with established personalities from their careers. So that's kind of what I'm interested to see.
Absolutely. And speaking of established personalities, you mentioned MMA earlier. So I was just curious to see if you were a Miesha Tate fan or knew anything about her.
I'm a MMA fan of recent. I would say probably over the last 2 years, which ironically enough, I think I only saw one of her fights because she took some time off from the peak of her career. I think she became a mom and took like 3 years off. And then she came back and I watched her first fight back and she ended up winning it as a massive underdog. So I hope she brings that same fight into the house because she's a great competitor in the octagon and a great fighter. So I'm excited to see how she does in the house because Miesha Cupcake Tate, as they call her, is someone fun with a great personality. Like I said, to go into the house. So, and that's why I mentioned Lamar Odom earlier. You know, I'm a sports guy. Lamar Odom being from the basketball world, obviously everything with the reality world in him as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out for him too. But 2 years since Big Brother, Celebrity Big Brother has even aired. So I know a lot of people are excited to get that back. It's kind of a fun watch. I think this season is 11 house guests. I want to say 15 episodes. So it's an easy watch during the month of February on CBS. So we'll have some episodes here of Celebrity Big Brother as well, hopefully joined by UK to talk Celebrity Big Brother some nights during the week of Celebrity Big Brother. But Kay, anything else from you before we call it an evening here?
Nope. I think that is all I had. If anybody is interested in recaps of Celebrity Big Brother this season and BB24 over the summer, you can find me at YouTube at Kayla Fro, KAYLAFRO.
Kayla Fro. Go find her on YouTube. And if you're into reality TV, stay here on the Reality Pop Network. They do Survivor, Big Brother, International Series, all the good stuff for reality TV. It's a lot of fun here on the Reality Pop Network. If you like top 10 videos, if you like tier rankings like Kay said earlier with her mid-tier ranking of Big Brother 23. Hopefully, honestly, I'd say the casting from Big Brother 23, probably top tier. Gameplay, maybe mid-tier, I would say is a fair way to say it. So hopefully we get another good season of Big Brother in the summer. But for now, we will look forward to Celebrity Big Brother. Kay, I look forward to continuing talking with you about Big Brother moving forward. But other than that, Reality Pop Nation, thank you for being here. Be sure to subscribe. But whatever you do, go make this world a better place and take care.